So I was watching the god-awful movie Norman the North the other day, and it made me think, if this movie just didn't exist, then 2016 would be a pretty good year for animation. I mean, not only did we get a Disney movie that follows the classic format, but still manages to feel refreshing, another Disney movie which is based off of cliche plot lines, but somehow avoids every cliche story beat, well, almost, a Laika movie, and another Kung Fu Panda movie, but we also got two amazing animes that still remain some of the best animated movies to date. Those movies being Your Name and A Silent Voice. One of them getting all the praise and love in the world, and the other one losing to Boss Baby in the Oscars. Yes, that Boss Baby. The one where Alec Baldwin plays a talking baby in a suit. Kill me. Now, most people would probably say that they prefer Your Name over A Silent Voice, and that's fine. I'm not trying to bash anyone's opinions. It's fine if you disagree with what I say in this video. I love both of these movies and hold them very dearly to my heart. With that being said, I think A Silent Voice is a much better movie compared to Your Name, which is why I decided to make a video like this. And don't worry, I'll still be talking about the good stuff in Your Name too. This video won't be like a one-sided Twitter argument, trust me. Anyways, let's start talking about the movies now. Click off the video right now if you don't want spoilers. Your Name is a love story. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a really good love story that does what it wants to do extremely well. It makes you care for the characters, then splits up the characters, and then with your mind a little bit, and then makes the characters meet again, and it's just amazing. But A Silent Voice, to me at least, is a lot more than just a love story. It's a movie about self-hatred. It's a movie about learning to forgive yourself. It's one of those rare movies that feels like it goes out of its way to reach out to me and say, I get you. It's a movie that has saved countless lives and helped lots of people forgive themselves for their past actions. It's a movie that makes me cry at least twice every time I rewatch it. And I don't cry easily in movies. Only like 6 movies or something have made me cry before. But this film just absolutely destroys me every time I revisit it. Your Name, in my opinion, isn't that emotional. Like, when Mitsuha just disappeared and the pen dropped onto the ground, I literally laughed out loud. And that's not to say that the emotional beat doesn't work, it does. But, I don't know man, just the way the music builds and then just randomly cuts as the pen drops onto the ground, that just had a comedic effect on me. Like, my brain couldn't register the fact that the scene was supposed to be sad. But again, it's still a phenomenal scene. Like when Mitsuha says, I can't remember your name with this, as she sees that he just wrote I love you instead of his name, that is some powerful shit right there, but it didn't even come close to making me cry, so yeah. But then again, I feel like that's the point. Your Name is a more fun and adventurous movie, while The Silent Voice is a more thought-provoking and emotional one. So I can totally understand why people would prefer the more fun movie. Also, another reason as to why so many people, me included, love Your Name is because it handles the body switch concept better than, well, any movie really. Sure, there are some logic issues, like how did neither of them check what year they were in, or how did they not check the day and notice that they weren't in their bodies yesterday, or why the would they think that it was just a dream when they switched bodies? But for the most part, it manages to explain everything about how this body switch thing works without having to give off needless exposition. And the jokes are mostly great as well, except from a few tone killers and some attempts at humor that I will simply ignore because I have the right to do that. A Silent Voice doesn't have many jokes, but it still had me laughing a couple of times throughout, because I feel like the comedy in that movie is based off of just daily life activities and human conversations, unlike how it is in Your Name, where it's mostly provided by people being dumb, people screwing up, and this. I mean, it still works for the most part, but it just doesn't feel as organic and natural as it does in A Silent Voice. Because in A Silent Voice, even if you don't think a joke is funny, you can still understand how the characters in the movie would find it funny. So yeah, that's basically why I like A Silent Voice better than Your Name. I think it's more emotional, the comedy feels more natural, and most importantly, the story is a lot more personal to me. Okay, I've proved my point. The video has to be over now, right? Right? Wrong. I'm not done talking about these movies yet. I'm gonna compare them for 30 minutes straight, and then I might actually make 2 separate videos on them both. Who knows? Anyways, let's look at the structures of these 2 movies. They both seem to not follow any format. They're the textbook definitions of slice of life. Things just happen. There doesn't need to be a connection or transition between the scenes that happen, but again, they happen. This helps make the stories feel more natural and closer to real life. Except I still feel like A Silent Voice handles this a lot better. Your Name still feels like his story is somewhat calculated and formulaic just because of its very Hollywood-like concept. Not to say that it is calculated and formulaic, but it feels like that. It still handles the body switch concept way better than any other movie, but on the outside, it feels like just another movie with this dumb concept that you've already seen a million times before. A Silent Voice, on the other hand, feels more fresh and new. Not that that affects the experience or anything, I just thought that it was worth noting. Also, something else I've noticed about Your Name, is it just me or does the movie get more mature as it goes along? Like, not just with its characters, but story-wise as well. Like, this line, for example. This was at the start of the movie.
Mitsuha just went straight home.
Like, right in your face, dude. Man's just staring at a wall and telling it that Mitsuha went home. It feels like that one line of dialogue in particular treats the audience like idiots. We're not stupid, okay? If we see Mitsuha in one scene, and then in the next scene she's not there, we would assume that she went home. It's not hard to figure out. But as the movie goes along, these types of lazily written lines of dialogue kind of disappear. And the movie becomes more mature. Like, look at this conversation near the end of the movie, for example.
Remember that one time when we went all the way to Itamori? You were still in high school back then, so it was...
5 years ago.
that long? It seems like I've forgotten a lot.
That is the single greatest way of telling the audience how long it's been since we last saw these characters. It's not just lazily thrown into your face. It takes its time. It uses the two characters and makes them talk to each other. It's so freaking brilliant and nothing like that other line of exposition at the start of the movie. This might have actually been intentional. Like, as the characters mature, the story also matures or something like that. If that's the case, then it's amazing. And if it's not the case, then I probably just made myself look like a complete idiot. But who cares? Let's just move on to comparing the characters. I'm not going to go over each and every single character in both of these movies, but I'm going to try my best to talk about the ones I have things to say about. First off, let's talk about the characters in Your Name. Your Name's two main characters are Mitsuha and Taki. I'll talk about Taki in a second, but for now I just want to focus on Mitsuha, because she is a damn well-written character. I really like how we mostly see things from her perspective at the start and understand her confusion. The movie also does a great job showcasing her wants and her needs. She has a small but touching character arc throughout the movie, and overall she was just a very likable protagonist. Okay, we've talked enough about Mitsuha, but what about my boy Taki? Yeah, I kinda hate him, honestly. Okay, sure, I admit it. He does have his fair share of moments of being likable, but mostly he's either a jerk or just a nothing. He either acts like a complete dickhead and ruins other people's lives, or he's just there because the plot said so. He literally has no personality. I mean, he likes drawing landscapes, I guess, but we don't really see the reasonings behind his passion. The movie doesn't really show us his life the way it did with Mitsuha. With her, we got to see the traditions she has to follow, the struggles she has to go through, the reasonings behind every single thought. She worked as a character because we, the audience, knew who she really was. After the movie ended, I literally could not tell you a single character trait of Taki. We don't see his life. We don't see his struggles. We don't even meet any of his family members. I mean, he has like one scene with his dad, but that's like the only time we ever see him, and it only lasts for like 10 seconds. He's also kind of annoying when he shouts at his friends for no reason outside of comedy, and yeah, he's just mostly boring. He's like Ginny from the Harry Potter movies. The idea of the character itself is good, but the execution offers absolutely nothing interesting, and once it starts overtaking the movie, it ruins the experience. I was just so emotionally distant to him throughout the movie, and I feel like that could have very easily been fixed. Okay, so imagine this scenario instead. Taki's mother died at a very young age, and ever since then, he and his father have never had a meaningful interaction with one another. Mitsuha sees this while she's in his body and relates to his struggle of having a parent die. So she tries to set something up for Taki and his father for them to connect to each other. Then they have a genuine conversation together about landscaping and architecture, and Taki tells him why he likes doing that. Then his father would be proud of him for finding out what he wants to do with himself. This would not only give Taki more depth, but also explain why he likes drawing landscapes and why he suddenly likes Mitsuha now. But whatever, instead of that, Mitsuha sets him up for a date with this girl he likes for some reason. Yeah, we don't really see why he likes her either. He probably just thinks she looks cute and that's it. He never talks about why he likes her, and all he does when he's on a date with her is meaninglessly just walk around and not talk. He doesn't even say a single word that makes sense. I know that the movie tried to show us that they weren't meant to be together, but proving that by telling us that he's just too boring for her is not the right way to do it, okay? We could have seen that they don't have a lot in common. They're both interested in different things, and that's fine. But no, instead he continues to not pay attention to her when they're literally together, and so she tells him he's boring and leaves. So yeah, I don't like Taki. But you know who I do like? That girl he goes on a date with, whose name I don't remember, and I'm too lazy to search up on Google. But yeah, she just has a charming personality and is a very understanding person. Even when Taki is the most boring person in the world and acts like a dumbass on their date, she nicely tells him that maybe they're not meant to be together, and he's acting kind of boring today, and she understandably asks him if he doesn't like her anymore and has a crush on someone else now. That right there is a person with empathy and respect. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed me getting angry at animated fictional characters for 2 minutes straight. Now let's talk about the characters in A Silent Voice. This one is difficult to talk about because I can kind of see a bit of myself in every single character in this movie. They all feel like they represent a part of me, in a good and bad way. Let's start off with Ishida. This is the first time in my life when watching a fictional character in an imaginary world made me feel uncomfortable with how much it reminded me of myself. Like, I don't want to get too personal about it or anything, but let's just say that this movie made me feel forgiven. It made me forgive myself. And Ishida's character in particular made me feel so seen. Same thing with Nishimiya. The way she feels like nothing but weight on everybody's shoulders. The way she tries to commit suicide but learns to love herself. I also just love her for how well written and realistic she is. She tries to be nice, but she is still a flawed individual. Then there's Ueno. A lot of people hate this character, and I can understand why, but at the same time I kinda love her. Yeah, she's done some awful things, but isn't that the whole point of the movie? That sometimes people deserve a second chance? If they're willing to change, if they're willing to try to become a better person, they deserve to be forgiven. Also, love her or hate her, you can't deny that she's one of the most well-written and realistic characters in the movie. It just feels like she is living her own film off camera and we're intersecting with it. It's also very obvious that she has a crush on Ishida despite never saying it out loud or even mentioning it. You can just tell from the way she looks at him and the way she forces out a laugh when she sees that Ishida doesn't really like her anymore. I could talk about her character for hours, but honestly, words can't do this amazingly well-written character justice. Then there's Nagataka. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about him other than he's probably my favorite goofball comic relief character of all time. He's just overall very charming, and any line of dialogue he ever has with anyone is comedy gold. Though I think my favorite line from him is this one, when Ishida asks,
What does it mean to become someone's friend? Like, is there some sort of friendship process you go through? Or like, do you need any specific qualifications?
Hey, Yasho. Friendship don't gotta do with no rules or qualifications, 'cause it's about something deeper. A bond, and you just can't break that.
And the way he's animated is fantastic too. He's the only character in this movie to ever make over-the-top facial expressions. Everyone else is animated to look more realistic and grounded, so it just makes him feel more lighthearted than everyone else. So yeah, overall I think the characters in A Silent Voice are a lot more fleshed out and complex than the ones in Your Name. And honestly, I blame Taki for that. F you, Taki. Anyways, let's compare the romances, shall we? Why not, I guess. I've already stated before how Your Name is a movie solely based on the premise of romance, and A Silent Voice isn't. So the romance in Your Name has to be better, right? Right?
No.
Now look, before y'all start smacking the dislike button, let me explain myself, okay? So I've already said before how I absolutely am not a fan of Taki, but he's not the problem here, okay? Just because I don't like a certain character, that doesn't mean that his relationship with someone else has to be awful. The problem is the everything. First off, these characters don't even meet one another in person until like the last 20 minutes of the movie. And I know that it needed to be like that or else the story wouldn't be the same, but still, they do not meet each other in person until the last 20 minutes. Okay, whatever. I can somewhat excuse that. It lets the movie develop and focus more on these characters individually. It also lets the story have more room to breathe, since if they met earlier in the film, the movie wouldn't really have many interesting places to go. So sure, whatever. My main problem is that we don't really see any similarities or a personal connection between them. And both of them tearing up at the exact same time for no reason whatsoever doesn't count. That's not how you logic. These characters don't even know each other that well. Taki only ever learns about Mitsuha's past and her desires towards the end of the movie, and Mitsuha just worked in his workplace. That's it. She doesn't really learn a whole lot about his character. And neither do we, really. A Silent Voice's romance, in my opinion, hits harder because the main characters have a history together. Ishida literally bullied Nishimiya. This romance, in my opinion, works better because of the contrast between them. They love each other but hate themselves. Ishida struggles to get over the fact that he used to bully her, and Nishimiya struggles because she thinks she's a burden to everyone around her. Ishida doesn't think he deserves to be loved, and Nishimiya doesn't think she deserves to love. And honestly, I think the line, "I want you to help me live," is a lot more meaningful than just "I love you." So yeah, another point for A Silent Voice, we're having a better romance. Now that that's out of the way, we can compare the music. I'm just gonna keep this section short and simple. I prefer A Silent Voice's soundtrack over Your Name's. And I like Your Name's score too, but it just doesn't feel specifically made for that movie. It doesn't tell the story. It sounds nice, but it's still your generic movie soundtrack. A Silent Voice's score, however, isn't the same. It doesn't show the characters' bonds like the How to Train Your Dragon soundtrack, and it doesn't show the progression of the story like the Three Idiots soundtrack, but instead does something a lot more subtle, yet a lot more impactful at the same time. Apparently when the composer recorded most of the songs, he put a microphone inside of the piano to get the noises of the inner workings and the sounds of the hammers hitting the metal strings, instead of the usual, more generic method in which most composers record their music. A YouTuber called The Cartoon Cypher made a video delving into what makes A Silent Voice's soundtrack so special. And I recommend you watch that video because honestly, he managed to explain it a lot better than me and really talk about how amazing the movie is. The link for the video will probably not be in the description because I most likely forgot. But anyways, before we move on to the next section, something else I would like to add that really stuck out to me was that most of the track names in the movie look like 3 random letters, such as LIT, QUT, SLT, and so on and so forth. But then you suddenly see this one piece called No One Is Here, and it feels so out of place. It's honestly perfect. It's meant to capture that feeling of loneliness, and in my opinion, it's one of the best pieces from a movie soundtrack ever. And the name only ever makes it that much better. So yeah, that's the music section. I know that it's a bit short, mostly because I didn't really have much to say about Your Name's soundtrack. But yeah, anyways, let's talk about the animation now. This section is gonna be a hard one to talk about, because I won't compare the quality in animation between these two movies. No. That would be practically impossible since these two movies both look equally fantastic. But instead, I'm going to be talking about how these movies use the medium of animation to tell the stories. And this is where my main problem with Your Name comes in. It didn't need to be animated. The exact same movie could be shot in live action and it would probably not look as pretty as it does here, but it would still be the same movie. It had no reason to be an animated movie other than they had a budget to make it look pretty. Now, try to imagine A Silent Voice in live action. You can't, because this movie relies completely on facial expressions, small movements, visual character quirks, metaphorical shots, and scenes where we're shown what seems to be the shape of sounds. Whether it be the vibrations of a beating heart, waves rippling across water, or the burst of fireworks. It shows the capabilities of the medium of animation as a whole, and cannot be replicated in live action no matter how hard anyone tries. Compare that to Your Name. There are no visual representations of anything, no metaphorical shots, no sequences that feel like they were made specifically for an animated movie. The only reason it's an animated movie is because, again, they had a budget to make it look pretty, so that people could go, wow, that one flower in that one scene looked so realistic. Or, wow, look at that cloud, it looks like a cloud. And like, yeah, it looks really pretty and the animators did a phenomenal job with it, but at the same time, when an animated movie has no reason to be an animated movie, it just bothers me. I don't know if that's just a me problem, but it just really frustrates me. There is one exception though. The scene where Taki learns about Mitsuha's past. This is my favorite scene from the movie, and for good reason. It is one of the most beautifully written, animated, and composed sequences I've ever seen in the history of cinema. And it's also the only scene where the animation actually does something interesting and not generic, and I can't even stress enough how amazing it truly is. If the entire movie was animated like this, or if we just got a couple of more scenes as creative as this one, I would not hesitate to call it a masterpiece. And I still think it's amazing, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I feel like I would have liked it a lot more if there were more sequences like this one. Overall, yeah, I like A Silent Voice more. It's not only my favorite animated movie ever made, but over time, it's also kind of become a part of me now. It just fills a hole in me, makes me feel alive. If it wasn't for this movie, I don't think I would be here right now. And even without thinking of the personal biases, I still think it's a more well-constructed and written movie with more intention behind it. I can still understand why so many people would think that Your Name is the superior movie, but in my eyes, A Silent Voice is a movie that has never been topped, and I don't think it ever will be. It's a masterpiece like no other and only ever gets better on rewatches. So I would probably give Your Name a 9 out of 10 and A Silent Voice a 10 out of 10. And if you haven't checked them out yet, then I recommend you watch them both. Even though I literally just spoiled the entire plot of both of them just a few minutes ago. Anyways, bye!